The world watches with bated breath as the skies over the Middle East continue to glow with the relentless fire of a conflict that has now fundamentally altered the global geopolitical landscape. As we mark the 30th consecutive day of the joint military campaign designated as Operation Roaring Lion, the reverberations of this escalating war are being felt not just in the immediate blast zones, but in the financial capitals, the diplomatic corridors, and the quiet homes of millions around the globe. This is no longer an isolated regional dispute, but a comprehensive crisis that has entangled multiple superpowers, fractured international supply chains, and triggered what many economic historians are already characterizing as the most severe global energy disruption in over half a century. To understand the sheer scale of the current situation, we must first look at the military theater, which has expanded far beyond its initial parameters to encompass a multi-front war of attrition. The joint forces of the United States and Israel have sustained a high-intensity aerial and naval bombardment campaign, targeting deep within Iranian territory. Intelligence assessments and satellite imagery confirm that the primary focus remains the systematic dismantling of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, ballistic missile production facilities, and critical naval command centers. The International Atomic Energy Agency has recently indicated that several key facilities, most notably the heavy water production plant at Kandab, have been rendered completely inoperable. However, the operational success of these strikes is measured against an increasingly sophisticated and sustained campaign of retaliation. Iranian military forces, utilizing an extensive arsenal of long-range ballistic missiles and autonomous drone swarms, have demonstrated a capability to project power far beyond their borders. The interceptor systems deployed across Israel, including the Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow systems, are working continuously to mitigate the impact of daily barrages directed at major population centers and industrial hubs. The technological duel in the skies is constant, yet the saturation tactics employed have inevitably led to localized breaches of these defensive shields. Furthermore, the strategic reach of these retaliatory strikes has expanded to encompass United States military installations situated throughout the region, including significant attempts to disrupt operations as far afield as the Diego Garcia Naval and Air Support Facility. The complexity of the battlefield is further compounded by the activation of allied militant networks across the region, effectively transforming neighboring sovereign states into active combat zones. In the north, the Israeli military has significantly escalated both ground and air operations within southern Lebanon. The stated objective, articulated clearly by the Israeli Prime Minister, is the establishment of a 30-kilometer security buffer zone to neutralize the immediate threat posed by Hezbollah's entrenched rocket forces. This northern theater alone has required a massive mobilization of reserves and has resulted in the widespread devastation of border infrastructure. Simultaneously, to the south, Houthi forces operating out of Yemen have maintained a persistent tempo of maritime harassment and long-range missile launches, drawing international naval coalitions into daily engagements in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. In response to this rapidly deteriorating security environment, the United States Central Command has executed one of the most rapid and substantial troop surges in recent modern history. Over 50,000 American service members are currently deployed to the region, supported by 2 carrier strike groups, advanced 5th-generation combat aircraft squadrons, and rapid deployment expeditionary forces. This formidable military posture is intended to serve a dual purpose: to actively support the operational objectives of the current campaign, and to act as an overwhelming deterrent against further regional escalation. Yet, the presence of such massive conventional firepower has also heightened the risk of miscalculation, with allied Gulf states operating on the highest possible alert levels as they monitor the daily traversal of contested airspace by advanced munitions. Beyond the kinetic engagements and the movement of troops, the economic shockwaves emanating from this conflict are reshaping the global financial order in real time. The most critical pressure point remains the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow maritime choke point through which approximately 1/5 of the world's total oil consumption traditionally passes. The effective closure of this vital artery, resulting from a combination of active mining operations, naval blockades, and the soaring costs of maritime insurance premiums, has severed a primary lifeline of the global economy. International energy markets have reacted with violent volatility, with the price of Brent crude reliably sustaining levels well above $116 a barrel. This surge in energy costs is not an abstract financial metric. It is actively driving up the cost of manufacturing, transportation, and basic consumer goods worldwide. The cascading effects of this energy crisis are particularly acute in import-dependent economies across Asia and Europe. Industrial output in several key manufacturing hubs has slowed as governments are forced to implement strategic energy rationing protocols. The International Energy Agency has mobilized emergency reserves, but officials privately concede that these measures offer only a temporary buffer against a structural supply deficit. The economic narrative is inextricably linked to the military reality. Every missile launch reported in the Gulf translates immediately into heightened anxiety on trading floors from London to Tokyo. The interconnected nature of modern commerce means that a disruption of this magnitude cannot be contained, leading financial institutions to revise global growth projections downward, while simultaneously bracing for a prolonged period of stagflation. Amidst the roaring of jet engines and the frantic ringing of trading bells, a quieter, yet equally desperate struggle is unfolding within the realm of international diplomacy. The pursuit of a negotiated settlement remains frustratingly elusive, hampered by deeply entrenched positions and a fundamental lack of mutual trust. Recent attempts to broker a cessation of hostilities have consistently stalled at the preliminary stages. A comprehensive 15-point ceasefire framework, painstakingly assembled by Western diplomats and delivered to Tehran through Pakistani mediation channels, was rapidly dismissed by Iranian officials. The characterization of the proposal as a maximalist demand for capitulation rather than a genuine starting point for negotiation underscores the vast diplomatic chasm that currently exists between the belligerents. Regional actors are acutely aware of the existential threat posed by a prolonged conflict and are actively attempting to construct alternative diplomatic off-ramps. A newly formed mediating bloc comprising representatives from Pakistan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey is working tirelessly behind closed doors to establish discrete communication channels. Their objective is to negotiate limited, localized pauses in the fighting to facilitate the movement of humanitarian aid and to build a fragile foundation for broader talks. However, the success of these regional initiatives is severely constrained by the stated objectives of the primary combatants. Both Washington and Jerusalem have publicly maintained a resolute posture, insisting that military operations will not be scaled back until the threat posed by Iran's advanced weapons programs is permanently neutralized. This divergence in strategic timelines has led to a notable fracturing of traditional diplomatic alliances. The United Nations Security Council, often the primary forum for conflict resolution, finds itself paralyzed by internal divisions and competing geopolitical interests. While there is universal rhetorical condemnation of the escalating violence and the tragic loss of civilian life, translating that sentiment into a binding, enforceable resolution has proven impossible. European nations, traditionally steadfast allies of the United States, have demonstrated a marked reluctance to fully endorse the expansive scope of the current military campaign. Several European leaders have explicitly declined requests to contribute naval assets to joint task forces in the Gulf, reflecting a deep-seated domestic opposition to becoming entangled in a wider Middle Eastern war. While politicians and generals debate strategy and geopolitical leverage, the true cost of this conflict is being paid in the currency of human suffering. The humanitarian toll is catastrophic and continues to compound with each passing hour. Independent aid organizations and international monitoring groups report that the civilian infrastructure across over a dozen affected nations is buckling under the immense strain of the violence. The systematic destruction of power grids, water desalination plants, and transportation networks has created an environment where basic survival is a daily struggle for millions of people. The displacement of populations has reached unprecedented levels, with vast columns of refugees seeking shelter from the relentless aerial bombardment and the advancing ground operations. Hospitals and medical facilities, operating far beyond their intended capacities, are facing critical shortages of life-saving medications, surgical supplies, and reliable electricity. The World Health Organization has issued dire warnings regarding the imminent outbreak of waterborne diseases resulting from compromised sanitation systems, a secondary crisis that threatens to claim as many lives as the direct military engagements. In the heart of the conflict zones, the psychological trauma inflicted upon the civilian populations is immeasurable. In densely populated urban centers, the wail of air raid sirens has become the defining soundtrack of daily existence, driving families into subterranean shelters for extended periods. The disruption of education systems, the collapse of local economies, and the pervasive climate of fear and uncertainty are inflicting deep generational wounds on the social fabric of the region. Even in areas not directly subjected to kinetic strikes, the indirect consequences of the war, such as internet blackouts, food scarcity, and hyperinflation, are severely degrading the quality of life and fueling a growing sense of desperation and unrest. As we stand at this critical juncture, observing the convergence of military escalation, economic instability, and humanitarian catastrophe, the path forward appears increasingly fraught with peril. The events of the past 30 days have dismantled decades of delicate regional balances and have exposed the fragility of the international order. The decisions made in the coming weeks by a handful of leaders will determine whether this conflict remains a devastating regional war or accelerates into a global confrontation with unimaginable consequences. The world continues to watch, hoping for a breakthrough in the diplomatic deadlock, yet preparing for the profound and lasting impact of a crisis that has already permanently altered the course of modern history.